You're watching a Canadian Prime Minister land in Beijing for the first time in nearly a decade, at the exact moment global trade alliances are cracking. One number tells you why this matters. Nearly 75% of Canada's exports still go to a single country, the United States. The question now isn't whether Canada wants options. It's whether it can build them without triggering consequences it can't control. If this visit succeeds, Canada quietly reshapes its economic future. If it fails, Ottawa risks being caught between two superpowers with shrinking patience. And if it escalates, the ripple effects won't stop at North America. They'll move through Asia, energy markets, and global supply chains already under strain. To understand why Prime Minister Mark Carney's trip to China matters, you need to zoom out. Canada's economy has long been structured around proximity and trust with the United States. For decades, geography functioned as strategy. The US absorbed Canadian energy, minerals, automobiles, lumber, and food at a scale no other partner could match. In 2023 alone, two-way trade exceeded 900 billion Canadian dollars. That dependency worked until it didn't. The return of Donald Trump to the White House changed the calculus. New tariffs, threats to rewrite trade agreements, and repeated suggestions that Canada's sovereignty was negotiable forced Ottawa to confront an uncomfortable reality. Economic security built on a single pillar is not security at all. Carney's response has been to accelerate diversification, with a stated goal of doubling non-US exports within 10 years. That ambition sets the stage for Beijing. China is Canada's second largest trading partner, but the relationship has been brittle for years. The rupture began in late 2018 when Canada detained a senior Chinese telecommunications executive at the request of US authorities. Beijing responded by arresting two Canadian citizens on espionage charges. For nearly 3 years, the two countries were locked in a standoff that chilled political trust and disrupted trade. When all three detainees were released in 2021, relations thawed, but they never normalized. Since then, friction has accumulated. Canada aligned with US policy on electric vehicles, imposing a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs and additional duties on steel and aluminum. Beijing retaliated with tariffs on Canadian exports, including canola, pork, and seafood, sectors that matter deeply to Canada's prairie provinces and coastal economies. The message was measured but clear. Economic alignment has costs. Carney's visit is an attempt to test whether pragmatism can return without either side losing face. He arrives not as a provocateur, but as a recalculator. His government frames the trip as part of a broader effort to build resilience amid global trade disruption. China, facing its own pressures from US tariffs and slowing growth, sees opportunity, but not without conditions. This isn't happening in isolation. Across the Western world, new leaders are quietly reassessing their China strategies. Australia spent nearly 2 years unwinding Chinese trade restrictions after a diplomatic reset in 2022. By late 2024, bans on wine, beef, coal, and lobster were lifted, restoring billions in exports. The United Kingdom, under a new government, has also signaled interest in stabilizing ties, even while maintaining disagreements over human rights and security. These precedents matter because they show the pattern. China is willing to re-engage economically, but only when it believes political signaling has softened. Canada's challenge is sharper. Unlike Australia, it sits directly beside the United States. Unlike the UK, it shares integrated supply chains that cannot be rerouted overnight. That's where the stakes become global. If Canada succeeds in deepening trade with China while maintaining its US alliance, it offers a template for middle powers navigating a bifurcating world. If it fails, it reinforces the idea that strategic autonomy is illusory for countries caught between giants. Consider the first what-if scenario. What if Carney secures partial tariff relief in exchange for regulatory adjustments or sector-specific compromises. Even a limited reopening of Chinese markets for Canadian agriculture would stabilize rural economies and signal momentum. It could also encourage further investment talks in energy transition minerals, where Canada holds significant reserves and China dominates processing capacity. That outcome wouldn't realign alliances, but it would rebalance leverage. Now consider the alternative. What if talks stall or worse, provoke backlash from Washington? A perception that Canada is drifting too close to Beijing could complicate upcoming reviews of North American trade agreements. US policymakers have already framed economic security in binary terms. In that scenario, Canada could face pressure from both sides, tariffs from one, suspicion from the other, narrowing its room to maneuver. The implications extend beyond North America. In South Asia, Canada's parallel effort to repair ties with India adds another layer. Relations with New Delhi deteriorated sharply after allegations surrounding the killing of a Sikh activist on Canadian soil. Diplomatic expulsions followed, along with frozen trade talks. A cautious thaw is now underway, driven in part by shared concerns over US protectionism. If Canada deepens engagement with both China and India, it positions itself as a connector rather than a camp follower, a role with economic upside but diplomatic risk. In the Middle East, Carney's planned stop in Qatar underscores how energy security fits into this puzzle. As global markets fragment, liquefied natural gas suppliers gain strategic value. Canada's outreach to Gulf states complements its Asia pivot, signaling that diversification isn't symbolic, it's structural. At the global level, this visit reflects a deeper shift. Trade is no longer just about efficiency, it's about insulation. Countries are building redundancy into supply chains, even at higher cost, to avoid coercion. China controls roughly 70% of rare earth processing. The US controls financial plumbing. Middle powers like Canada must navigate both realities simultaneously. There's also a domestic dimension. Carney inherited a country fatigued by external shocks. Pandemics, inflation, housing shortages. Economic stability is political stability. Expanding export markets isn't abstract policy. It's about jobs, prices, and growth. But voters are also sensitive to sovereignty and values. Any perception of overconcession could carry electoral consequences. China, for its part, approaches this visit with calibrated optimism. Official statements emphasize momentum and pragmatism, while state-aligned media frame the trip as a fresh starting point, provided Canada revisits what Beijing considers unreasonable trade barriers. The subtext is familiar. Cooperation is available, but alignment has expectations. So, what should viewers watch next? Not the handshakes, but the sequencing. Which tariffs are discussed first? Which sectors are named publicly and which are left vague? Whether follow-up mechanisms are announced or talks are deferred. And crucially, how Washington reacts, not rhetorically, but procedurally. This moment isn't about choosing sides, it's about whether middle powers can still choose strategies. The world is drifting toward blocs, but drift isn't destiny. Canada's bet is that flexibility remains possible, even under pressure. Late at night, when you strip away the press releases, this visit is about one question. Can economic independence be built quietly before the walls go up? Because once they do, movement becomes negotiation, and negotiation becomes risk. Power today isn't declared, it's diversified, and the countries that understand that early don't make noise. They make options.